Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? For the last couple of months, I have been expanding my comic book collection. These ones back here have been in the collection for a while now, but pretty much all of these are new since December. Now, most of those are in Skybound's Energon universe, and I'm going to do a whole video on that later. But I wanted to highlight this book in particular because I think it represents a cool experiment in the comic space right now. Image Comics is, from what I understand, it's a label that kind of spun off from the big two. Maybe it was mostly from Marvel. If I get the story right, it's basically that a bunch of talented writers and artists and stuff left one of the larger publishers to start their own. And it seems like this Ghost Machine line is a microcosm of that same experiment. Now, I don't keep track of all of the names in comics right now that are either succeeding or causing trouble. That's for your boy Zach to do. There are a few exceptions, a few names that I'll recognize as somebody like, okay, if this person's writing a comic, I'm not going to waste any time reading it or whatever. But I decided, experiment wise, that I was going to grab this book off of the shelf from my LCS and just thumb through it and say, what if I didn't know any of the external stuff that was going on in comics right now? What if I was just approaching this objectively? What would my thoughts be? Without knowing any of the names of people attached, if I were to just read this without any kind of preconceived notions. And, well, let's see what the results of this experiment are so far. According to the inside cover flap, Ghost Machine is the first fully shared, creator-owned universes. There's a big long paragraph here, and I'll try to get close so you guys can pause and read it. But here are the creators that are involved. The only name that I recognize is Jeff Johns, which, funnily enough, the wife and I, we're watching Smallville right now, and there's an episode there in the fourth season where there's a character named Jeff Johns. I know that he's been involved in DC Comics since forever. And again, like I don't keep track of whether he's one of those guys that a lot of people like or if he's one who's been causing trouble for the last 10 years. I'm not going to look it up. I don't care. What is my experiment with this whole thing? Well, like I said, I wanted to see what my own thoughts were, independent of anybody else's coloring of it. This particular issue, it was $5, and it's a bunch of samples, or basically a bunch of issue ones, for stories that are coming out over the next couple of months. There's one called Geiger, which is this one here. I read this one, and I didn't think this was the story that was going to do it for me. It's set in like some kind of grungy post-nuclear apocalypse world. There's a whole bunch of people with gross radiation damage, and you got to walk around with suits on and stuff. I was like, yeah, this one probably isn't going to be for me. Even if the art is technically sound and done well, I decided I won't be reading Geiger when that comes along. But hey, there are a few more to sample in this, and well, let's see what they are. Oh boy, big old timeline here. I think this is a roster of characters that are jumping through that timeline and overlapping. Ooh, the red coat. This was a character that interested me. I guess the aesthetic really did too. I'm interested in seeing more like crossover Revolutionary War slash supernatural or speculative elements type stories. Apparently, this guy is kind of like Wolverine and Sabretooth in that he's been around for a long time. He's more or less immortal. Nobody can hurt him, etc., etc. President, strong woman with extremely tall high heels. Those are all apparently part of the same lineup. I originally kind of got the gist that Redcoat was going to be the main character of his own line, but apparently it ties in with the whole Geiger thing. Now, this book, Rook, this is the one that I think I'm going to have the most interest in, and I'm definitely going to pick it up when it comes out. I was listening to Midnight's Edge today, and they were all reminiscing over the fact that the 80s were kind of the golden age of cinema in the West, and even today, the biggest properties are basically callbacks to the 80s or remakes or late sequels or whatever. And they were especially discussing this in the context of Ghostbusters. But they even went down the rabbit hole talking about how you don't get the kind of whistleable, iconic scores that you used to get from movies in the late 70s, 80s, and even into the early 90s. And somebody super chatted the Midnight's Edge group and said, Care Bears was an example of how you could just have a completely gonzo concept. People would do something that was ridiculous and out there, but it would work and it found an audience, and people still refer to Care Bears to this day. I think that creatives need to be a little bit more reckless and gung ho and unrestrained, really. Maybe reckless is the wrong word. And I think that perfectly captures the description of this Rook comic, where it's set on a terraformed world that something went wrong with the terraforming process, or it's being abandoned. And for whatever reason, there's also this technology where people wear these specially crafted and coated masks that allow them to control certain types of animals. This guy, Rook, he can control birds of the Corvus genus. This guy, I can't remember his name, but he can control boars with his mask. And there's a female character. You see her briefly right there. She's the one here on the cover. She wears a lupine, however you want to say that, mask. And her call sign is Dire Wolf. She can control wolves. This was just a little bit of a sample, but between the aesthetic and the concept and the little tiny bit that we got of the story, I thought this is a good mashup of just bonkers ideas. It's that kind of fearless creativity that it very, very well may have struck on a successful formula. I'm going to get the first couple of issues, see where it goes, see how they handle it. But out of all the ones they pitch in this Ghost Machine sampler, I think this is the one that's going to do it most for me. Oh yeah, see, they're even leaning into the playability of it. If this one takes off, you'll be able to buy probably collector's masks, and there'll be action figures, and there'll be the whole nine. It'll carry on that tradition without like mimicking it or parodying it. It'll follow along in that vein, but still be very much its own thing. The next story was this one called The Rockefellers, and this is kind of moving in the other direction. This is one that, to me, it felt like it was trying too hard to be something of yesteryear without really accomplishing something of its own. I felt like this was somebody trying to do a mashup of like The Incredibles and Meet the Robinsons. It was trying to be like 1950s atomic age. We've got a VW bus. All the characters' names start with the same letter. They get special abilities, etc., etc. This one didn't really move the needle for me. I don't have a whole lot of interest in it. Again, like the Geiger story, it looks like the art is all technically sound and everything. It's just not pushing the buttons of creativity for me. Then there's this story here, Hyde Street. It's got a little bit of like Are You Afraid of the Dark, Men in Black type vibe to it. A little bit of Supernatural, a little bit of this, that, and the other thing. You can tell that it's going to lean harder into the creepy horror side of it. Not really sure where it's all going, but it's got potential. I'm not going to immediately write it off. I'm curious to see more about it, but it doesn't necessarily do what the Rook concept does for me. Anyway, well, good thing I'm video recording so that it doesn't immediately try to send me to Instagram with that QR code. I'm excited for these creators to put something together like this that they're really, like, obviously very passionate about. And I think it was a cool idea for them to put together this sampler. Ignore those candy wrappers on my floor. My dog likes to eat things. Put together this sampler so people can get an idea of the many different avenues that this team is going to take. I think it's cool, and I like the boldness of it, and I think we need more of that. Obviously, I've told you which one does it for me, and I'm sure that people watching this are going to see stuff that does it for them. And that's the cool thing about casting a wide net is you can find different people and rake them into your audience, and that will keep the label viable if that's really what all they're aiming to do. We'll sell maybe 15,000 of this title and 10,000 of this title a month, and et cetera, et cetera. And if it all comes out in the wash, then they can all keep creating, just as long as nobody's dragging them down. Anyway, that's my thoughts. Let me know what yours are. Final note: that title, Ghost Machine. I had a YA novel that I was working on years ago. In fact, it's the one that got me an agent in 2011. Completely unworkable concept, but it's one that's stuck in the back of my mind as a trunk novel that I might work on later. Now I don't think I will at all. But obviously the title of this one jumped out. I was like, hey, wait a minute. Somebody else beat me using that title then? No, apparently that's just the name of their world. But hey, it got my eyes on the book, and then the Direwolf character pulled me in, and yeah, I'll let you know what the Rook series looks like when I start collecting those issues. But thanks for watching. Comment below, like, share, subscribe. Till next time, drive safe. See you out there.